Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show. He is a former two-time ECW Tag Team Champion, former ECW World Tag Team Champion. He's not just the coolest. He is not just the best. He is Justin fucking credible, man. How are you?
Great, dude. How you doing?
I am doing great. Very excited to have you join us on the show today.
Thank you.
As we record this, happy Thanksgiving to you.
Absolutely, and to you as well.
Well, thank you. I got a lot I want to talk about, man. You have a great career. You've done so much in this industry, so much to talk to you about. Unfortunately, my co-host Mike couldn't join us today. He did send me a little voice note here, so I'm going to play it for you. He wants to start off the question here, so I'm just going to play that right now. Let me know if you can't hear it, and I just ask the question.
Sure.
Hey, Justin, Mike here, the other half of Mike and Tyler. Thanks so much for being on the show. Sorry I couldn't make it, but I'm sure Tyler's treating you real good. My question for you, you were trained in Canada. You were trained by Canadians. You had a successful tag career with a Canadian. So is it fair to say that you have a bit of a soft spot for our country? Thanks again for being on the show, man.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. It's my pleasure. I certainly have my background is very much based in Canada. I was trained in Calgary, the summer of 1992. My first match was in Rocky Mountain Pro Wrestling in Calgary, October 16th. And my first 10 matches as well were in Canada, in Calgary, versus Lance Storm. I think he was my fifth or sixth match. Chris Jericho was like my third. Canada has been very good to me. It's like a second hometown, especially Calgary as well, Calgary, especially all the way out in the West. So yeah, absolutely.
So what made a young guy from Waterbury, Connecticut decide to travel all the way out to Calgary and get to that Hart Brothers School?
Sure. Back in the day, I'm talking 1992, I was 19 years old. I just graduated high school. I was working at a grocery store. And during break, we would, get 15, 20 minutes. I would go to the magazine aisle and read the wrestling magazines. And back in the day, there was no internet and stuff like that. Wrestling was still a bit kayfabe. So I saw an article in a magazine, I think it was Pro Wrestling Illustrated, that said, that was an advertisement for the Hart Brothers. And I called and I spoke to Bruce Hart, who was Owen and Brett's brother, and so forth. And, I saved up my money and, I bought a plane ticket and off I went, because back then I didn't realize there were schools closer to me in Connecticut, in New York, etc. But I don't regret it because I got some of the best wrestling schooling. I mean, being trained by the Harts is pretty cool,
Absolutely.
I was very blessed,
You mentioned a name there, and we're a couple boys from Toronto here, Justin, and the Hart name obviously goes a long way in our country. Sure. But you mentioned Bruce Hart, and Bruce, he's a pretty. You hear some pretty good stories about Bruce. What do you got? Any good Bruce Hart stories? Because from what you hear, he's a little bit not afraid to put himself out there.
I didn't know him very well, and later on in life, as I matured into the business, I realized he was really kind of just scamming me and scamming others with the Hart Brothers name, to be perfectly frank. Although I did get a great wrestling education, Lance Storm had come through the same exact camp as I did, and he got trained in 1990. Him and Jericho came through the same year in the same camp. So Lance had come back to train the Harts camp. So really, in essence, Bruce Hart came by once a week or so, but in reality, Lance did most of the work. So, but it was what it was. I was just happy to get into the fold and to just learn the business. But to be honest, I didn't have much of a relationship at all. If not just maybe a couple of conversations with Bruce Hart. So, it was more for the name.
So you mentioned some names there, and I kind of want to touch base on a couple of them. What was it like working with a very young Chris Jericho and a very young Lance Storm? Lance has a reputation being one of the greatest trainers in the business right now. He had a great school that produced many of the talents that you see on TV today. How was it like being in there with a very young Lance Storm?
He was great, even from a very young age, not just a young man, but young in the business. He had only, like I said, he trained in 90 and he trained me in 92. So he had 2 years under his belt. So the ability Lance had to kind of just communicate to the men and women he was training was really unique. He was very patient. And just very relaxed, and he made us all feel comfortable. He was very safe, made us feel safe, which in turn is great because the more confidence you have in your trainer, the more effort, you know what I mean, the more secure you feel. So you're more able to go out there and give it your all without necessarily being scared of getting hurt or getting messed up by somebody who may have ulterior motives. So it was really kind of cool to see that from Lance, and not really knowing much either. So I was very green and didn't know anything about the business. So just that whole thing, Lance was way ahead of his time at a very young age.
Well, and it's not too long after you started. You got a lot of work with the WWF. How did you kind of get your foot in the door there? Because you were in the ring with some of the biggest stars of all time.
Yeah. Well, I came back. Like I said, I did my first 10 matches in Calgary. That was all through like I said, October 16th was my first match in Calgary, all the way up through December. We wrestled every Friday night in Victoria Park in Calgary, right next to the Saddle Dome there. And after those 10 matches, it was about 10 weeks, I came back to the States. And after the Christmas break, I really didn't have many connections in America. I trained and known, all my connections were in Canada. So I just started going to local shows. And one day, the WWF was coming to town for a house show. And I was like, well, just stop by and introduce yourself, because Lance had always said, and they always preached, like, it's okay to show up to shows and kind of make yourself known and, put yourself out there. So I did. I brought my gear, and I went backstage to a WWF house show, and I met Tony Gurria. And he asked me just a bunch of questions like, well, how old are you and where did you train? And I said, well, I was trained by the Harts in Calgary. And he goes, really? He goes, okay. And he goes, well, we don't need anybody tonight because that was always your thing, right? You brought your bag and you were like, hopefully somebody didn't show up. So, they'd use you at house shows. That happened quite a bit back in those days. But anyways, nothing happened. I watched the whole show backstage, and they were very kind to me. And as I thanked Tony Gurria and said my goodbyes, he goes, well, let me get your number because we're starting a new show in Manhattan called Monday Night Raw, and we could use some extras. And I was like, great. New York was only an hour and a half from my home. And a couple of weeks later, I'm on Monday Night Raw wrestling Lex Luger,
No kidding. Wow.
just doing jobs and stuff like that. So, yeah, it was pretty cool. And really, that's how I got my foot in the door. Simple as that,
Well, and I think it's safe to say that the company saw something in you because they gave you a pretty big shining moment in the early days of Raw. There, they put you over IRS on live TV. How did that feel for being so young in the company to get kind of a little break like that? Did that put a little bit of shine on you? You think with some people?
Oh, it totally did. And again, just being in the right place at the right time. And the business was in a bit of a transition. We're coming out of the Hulk Hogan Ultimate Warrior era. And they were really looking to kind of start to make their own young talent because a lot of the talent was starting to get a bit older. And, moving forward, I was 21 years old, already pretty seasoned and was, I had something to offer. So they started me slowly just getting me involved in wrestling small B-town house shows, small auditoriums and high school gymnasiums and such. But still, nonetheless, I'm wrestling every weekend. So it was a great opportunity. And again, I think I was just in the right place at the right time. Living in Connecticut certainly was a huge help because, WWF then or WWE now still based in Stamford, which is about a 45-minute drive from where I was born and raised. It was just a perfect fit for me, and just started to gain relationships and you meet people and, just the ball rolled from there, really. It was a very natural progression. It really didn't seem like as big of a deal as now when I look back that it really was, So,
Well,
yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're in the ring, mention a guy like Lex Luger, we talked about IRS, Razor Ramon, The Undertakers. How much are you learning being in there? Even if you're just in that little enhancement role, like you're getting
Sure.
firsthand learning right as you're going in the ring there. How much are you learning from these guys? And is anyone taking you under their wing in the back a little bit and kind of
Sure.
guiding you?
The first part of it, yeah. I mean, I was learning every time you get in the ring, you're learning so much just from where, I'd never worked on television before, right? So, you're learning how to be on television and to work towards the cameras and so forth, and you're just getting confidence up and learning the basics and learning how to, just how the WWF world operates, and then. As I moved forward, Scott Hall was one of the first guys kind of take me under his wing because I remember I was so young when I started going on the road, traveling and wrestling. I couldn't rent my own car. So I was traveling a lot with the office, like the agents, like Chief Jay Strongbow, Pat Patterson, Blackjack Lanza. And they were all very kind and all, but Razor's like, if you're going to travel with the office, you're going to get heat, kid. He goes, come with me. So I started traveling with him, and he started to teach me ins and outs of the business, and from there it just kind of became a process of learning and getting better every time I went out there.
Yeah, and that's some of the stories that you always hear is you get a lot of the knowledge on those long car rides from town to town,
Sure.
breaking down the
Yeah.
matches. What are those conversations like for somebody like Scott and, saying to you in the car, what kind of advice is he giving you to help get yourself over a little more?
The one thing wrestlers, and especially Scott, but wrestlers in general, we always like to talk about one another or about ourselves, I should say. So, we would always start with our matches, like, oh, my match was the shits tonight. It was horrible. This went wrong. This, we messed this spot up, or the crowd just wasn't there. And, I'm kind of just quiet listening to all of this knowledge, really not knowing much, just trying to absorb all of it. But in reality, like I'm listening to, these are the guys, like I think Razor was wrestling Shawn Michaels for the Intercontinental title at the time on the house show. So I'm listening to his experiences with Shawn, getting all of this knowledge on the whys and wheres and hows he's doing in his match and how I could apply it to mine. So really it became a classroom from day one, just really absorbing and learning as much as I could right from, that young age. I was very lucky in a very unique situation.
That's great, man. And you
Yeah.
can really tell that, I always live by a saying that was passed down for me from my grandfather that you have two ears and one mouth for a reason, right? So for being a young kid, you're just sitting there and listening. And it really showed in your work towards, once you got into ECW, and I want to get into that in a little bit. Not too long after this IRS thing, you got signed to a full-time deal with the company. How does that feel for being so young in the business to being signed by the biggest company in the history of this profession?
I mean, it was surreal. I mean, this is your dream. And literally it happened. It happened very slowly. I was doing jobs for the WWE for about a year, and I'll tell the story as quick as I can, not to bore anybody. But at the time, like I said, I lived 45 minutes next to the office, and they were looking to bring in Brian Lee to do the fake Undertaker with Mark.
Mm-hmm.
And they needed somebody to go in and kind of work with Brian Lee to kind of bump around for him, so Brian could get to work on his Undertaker mannerisms, etc., etc. So I got a full week. They didn't have a performance center at the time. It was just a ring they set up at their warehouse up in Stamford. So me, Mark, and Brian Lee, we got to work the entire week. I was basically just a crash test dummy. And then on the final day, Vince McMahon and Pat Patterson came in, and they wanted to see Brian Lee in full gimmick as The Undertaker before they debuted it on television the following Monday. I would say like 2-3 days from then. So after that, we did a full dress rehearsal for Vince. Pat Patterson just started to ask me questions, like who trained you? I was like the Harts, and he kind of popped, like, really? Oh my God, because obviously they had a huge relationship with Brett and Owen at the time. And he asked me, what nationality are you? And I said, well, I'm Portuguese. And Pat Patterson had a huge, like, oh my God, really? And he goes, hey, Vince, this kid's Portuguese. And I was like, that's kind of odd. Nobody ever popped for me being Portuguese before. And then Pat asks me the next question. He goes, well, do you speak it? And I said, yes, sir, I do, which was the truth. My parents are immigrants and came to this country in 1970. I was born here in 73. So I speak, that's what we spoke at the home. So he goes, hey, Vince, this kid also speaks Portuguese. And they both pop. And I'm like, this is really weird. Long story short, they were looking for a Portuguese wrestler the entire time to fit the mold and the character of Aldo Montoya to go overseas for Portuguese speaking markets like Brazil and so forth, and Portugal, obviously, and other countries that speak Portuguese. So that was the whole reason for it. Like I said, right place and the right time.
Wow, man, and that's amazing. And I know I'm doing my research for this here that you and Brian Lee actually did get to work on television as well when he was in the Fake Undertaker, right?
Yep, it was that following night, or that following Monday night, I should say.
Oh, that's awesome. How nerve-wracking is that for you to be doing that match in the warehouse in front of Vince? Does Vince have that? Because you always hear he has this aura and presence about him.
He did. But believe it or not, I was not as nervous because Vince was a lot more. He was more one of the boys back then. Like I had a relationship. I think a lot of us did back then, where I could pull Vince aside and have a conversation with him, or go into his office, which I had done many times. Where today, I think a lot of the younger wrestlers, there's the way it's structured is a bit different, which I find odd. But back then, Vince really had his hands in all sorts of creative, where he had personal relationships with everyone up and down the card. You know what I mean? It wasn't this big, 100-man roster. It was it was much less. So, if you had a problem, you'd go see Vince. You wouldn't, you know what I mean? It's not like today, So, it was cool though. It was amazing to work with Vince. And he was a very scary, intimidating person. He was the boss.
Well, and I think that personal relationship too is why so many of these characters, like the Aldo Montoyas, and they're all fondly remembered as fans because you could talk to Vince, you could put the tweak on it, and he had his fingerprints on it. Whereas today, you see a lot of gimmicks, they kind of just get lost in the shuffle, and time will tell if they're going to hold up just like some of the ones did back in the day, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what were your initial thoughts after when Vince pitched you Aldo Montoya?
I was just happy to get an opportunity, to be honest. The character they had originally drawn up for me was not the Aldo Montoya character everybody saw. It was originally supposed to be a soccer player.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because it was the time of the World Cup, and business was really bad in the United States. Vince was going through his steroid trial at the time. So money was bad, attendance in business was bad. Vince was, really kind of struggling as a businessman, and we were really relying on the overseas market. So the only reason that they used a Portuguese character was to, like, Davey Boy Smith was very popular in England, etc. They kind of were thinking going overseas and getting that business while it was hot, because in the States it was not. So that was really the impetus to kind of, use a Portuguese character. So originally it was a soccer player.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So they bring you in and you debut on Monday Night Raw against the Brooklyn Brawler. You guys have a great match, and they gave you a pretty big angle, with the $1 Million Man, who was one of the top heels in the company, trying to offer the services. Like, how are you feeling with the start of this gimmick? You're getting an angle with DiBiase. Shortly after that, they put you over Jeff Jarrett in a non-title match. Like, you're getting a pretty good rub there. Strong showing at the Rumble 95. Are you feeling pretty optimistic that they're going to do something pretty decent with you here?
I did. Yeah, I was cruising along. I felt good about it. And, I was just, I knew, and I was pretty much told too, in that time, that this was just a temporary thing. Not necessarily, temporary as it's only going to be a year or two, but this isn't going to be your ultimate landing spot. This is, and that's also the reason for the mask, is that this is just going to be a thing that you could use to learn. And someday when, you come to, maybe a little more, mature or whatever in the ring, 24, 25, 26, we could change your character and use you on more of a main event level.
That's really smart.
But unfortunately it ended up being ECW. Well, not unfortunately. It was actually quite great for me, but it just didn't end up working out that way, and I ended up going to ECW.
So how do you end up in ECW? Was it because they had a working relationship at the time? Were you like a little frustrated? Because I know you did some stuff in Memphis right before there. How do you end up in ECW?
I was frustrated, and it had been a couple of years, and I went to Vince. I had a meeting in his office. I went up to Stamford, and this is what I mean again about being able to have one-on-ones. I went and met with Vince in his office in Stamford, and I was like, Vince, I appreciate your opportunity that you've given me. I've been doing Aldo now for almost 3 years. Razor and Scott and Kevin had just gotten signed to WCW with the NWO. And I was, pretty good friends with Scott and Kev and all those guys, really. And Scott's like, dude, come on over, get your release. We'll get you paid, Bischoff will get you a job. And I said, Vince, you're not doing anything. I don't see you really interested in doing anything with me. I'd like my release because I had 1 year left on my contract. And Vince said, absolutely not. He goes, it's not that I'm trying to be a jerk to you. It's just, it's a bad look if another one of my guys jumps over to WCW. So he goes, absolutely. He goes, but what I will do is I'll send you to Memphis, and I want you to learn how to work as a heel. And then we'll bring you back up as a heel character, and, have you give you a run in the IC spot. So I said, okay, whatever. And I went to Memphis. I worked the Memphis territory for Jerry, which was, again, like a developmental for the WWE. I worked there for 6 weeks. And in one of my last weeks there, ECW had come down. They were doing an angle with Jerry Lawler and Paul Heyman, kind of like, Lawler had this invasion angle with ECW. And, from there, I saw Chris Candido. And Candido and I had been good friends because he was in the WWF as Skip of the Body Donnas. And Candido was one of Paul's right-hand guys. So, Chris was like, man, you got to come to ECW. We're doing big things. Business is taking off, man. We're going to pay-per-view. So he sold me on the gig. Long story short, he had Paul Lee go to Vince and say, Vince, give me his contract. I'll make sure he doesn't go to WCW. He'll work with us. And then, when I'm done with him, we'll, send him back over to you. And in essence, it didn't work out that way, completely the way I'd envisioned. But I was there till, I was in ECW from 97 till it closed. And right after it closed, I went back to WWE. So in essence, that's really kind of what did happen.
Came full circle there, right?
Right. So, 2001, I found myself back there teaming with X-Pac,
So you're talking about, again, the ECW now, and we're mentioning Paul Heyman. What's the big differences between working with a guy like Paul Heyman and working with a guy like Vince McMahon? Because, from a fan standpoint, those are two of the biggest promoter names that we're hearing, right? What are some of the big differences between the two of them?
Paul was very much a great motivator, he made you believe in yourself. He made you really think you could do anything. You could, walk through a burning building. He really did. He made you believe in yourself. And that's why ECW worked. Because if you look at the guys and gals that were there in ECW, it was a lot of people who had been to WWF or WCW and didn't succeed on a big level. But then once they got there, it's kind of like the universe opened up to them. So it was what Paul did was really give you the opportunity to be yourself and to create, where the WWF was just a bit more, a lot more political, and just, just a different animal. And ECW, man, it was just the vibe of that place it was the cool wrestling place at the time. It's like,
no, absolutely.
If you didn't like what WWF was doing, if you didn't like what WCW was doing, it was like what punk rock was to pop music kind of a thing. It was something new. It was something loud. It was cool. It was different, and that's really what it was. And it was, the greatest period in my career and for a lot of us, and it was a great time in pro wrestling,
No, I couldn't agree with you more. And your work in ECW is fantastic. I want to dive a little bit into it. Who came up with the Just Incredible gimmick? Because I loved it. I think the name is awesome. The catchphrase was awesome. Yeah. Like, whose idea was that?
Paul Heyman did not come up with it, as a lot of people sometimes think Paul came up with it. Wild Bill Wiles, who wrestled under the name Bilvis Wesley towards the end of ECW, did like an
Okay.
Elvis gimmick. He came up with the gimmick for Paul, or not for Paul, for himself. And Paul's like, I don't see you doing that Just Incredible name or gimmick, but the gimmick was my own, but the name. So, but he goes, I'll pay you if I could take the name from you and put it on PJ. So, that's how it went. Somebody else came up with the name. Paul bought the name from them for like, I think, a couple of $100, like $200, literally. And he gave it to me, and off we went.
No, absolutely. And you started out with a pretty big bang in there too. How important do you think, I know a lot of guys don't really care about wins and losses and stuff, but how important do you think it was for you to get put over by the great Sasuke right off the get-go?
Yeah, I think it mattered only because of perception in the business. It didn't really, wins and losses matter to some degree, but it was more the perception of, if you're going over on the great Sasuke, they're going to do big things with you. So right away, it kind of elevated me to another level, as opposed to maybe getting a win or two over local talent. It just kind of made me an international, or put me in the international scope of wrestling.
Yeah,
like
kind of legitimized you a bit,
yeah,
right?
people in the magazines in Japan were talking about it. All over the sheets and stuff, they were talking about it. So yeah, it kind of legitimized the whole process, really.
Well, and especially in front of that fan base too. From even today's product, you don't see a fan base quite like the ECW arena crowd, especially. What was it like being in front of those guys? What's the pressure like in front of them? I know they were all over you. They had some pretty good chants with you. What's your overall memories of just working in front of such a rabid crowd?
Man, I loved it. And to me, it was almost like, they became my friends. That was one way to get over with them, is like, I became familiarized with them. I became, very humble to them. It was like it's almost like it was a wink. I'd wink like, like I'd wink my eye to them. It was like, we're all in on the gag together. It's like, and then they appreciated my humility and kind of the whole thing. So to me, the ECW crowd was always very generous, and they were very kind to me, and they worked with me as opposed to working against me, so to speak.
I guess if they weren't with you, that would make things a lot harder for you. So for me, Justin, one of my favorite programs that you did in ECW, you have to talk about Jerry Lynn.
Sure.
You guys tore the house down pretty much every time you got in the ring. One of my personal favorites, that Heat Wave. What was it like? What are some of your memories about working with Jerry? Is he as good as everybody says he is? Because he's amazing as far as I'm concerned.
He was. He was one of the just so crisp in the ring, so giving as far as letting you get your stuff in there. You know what I mean? Like doing all of your move sets. Like a lot of people are, sometimes a little selfish as what they let you do in a match, and they're always worried about how they're going to look. Where Jerry was very much like, and a little bit like myself, I'd like to think, where we just wanted to make the match good, regardless of how, you know what I mean? We thought of ourselves second. We thought of what would make the match good first. So Jerry was just a pleasure. We had great chemistry he was the first match I wrestled as Just Incredible.
Oh, really?
In the ECW arena in October of '97. If you go back and look in the record books, and I went over on him. And he was the first person I did the spinning tombstone to, and everything. So Jerry Lynn, he's one of the greatest. I mean, he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. In some Hall of Fame. I don't know if it would be WWF, but he is certainly not only a great wrestler, but a great human being. I mean, all around, Jerry was awesome. I was very blessed. I don't think I would have the career I had if it wasn't for Jerry Lynn. Let's put it that way.
That's awesome, man. And Jerry Lynn's a personal favorite of mine. Just his body of work over his whole career has just been incredible, right?
Forget about it. Yeah, he's one of the best.
So shortly after this, you get paired up with Lance Storm again. How did that come to be? And was that kind of cool for you to go back kind of right from where you started and training or working with Lance as a tag team?
I to be honest, I don't remember exactly why or how it happened. All I know is it was a super cool thing because, you know, here's Lance, somebody like he was the first person I knew in the pro wrestling business. You know, he was my trainer, he was my teacher, also a friend, and you know, it was a dream come true. I mean, everything I was, as far as, you know, I was this brash character, very boisterous, you know, in your face. I talked a lot of smack. And Lance was the opposite. He was a technician, you know, more of a wrestler's wrestler. So it's like we were polar opposites, but yet together through, you know, the hearts or whatever you want to call it, or through him training me, we just were on the same page, if that could be like two polar opposites on the same page. So it was natural, you know, and if you notice, if you go back and look at the Impact players from the early days, we're having good matches, but we're still kind of figuring it out. And when you look towards the end of the Impact players, you know, it's like Lance is starting to, like, we're doing the Shawn and Diesel pose, and Lance is starting to get kind of goofy and, you know, wearing like bandanas and trying to kind of, like, he was coming out of his own shell. So it's like we really kind of helped each other. It's like I said, like, you know, what he didn't have, I had, and what I didn't have, he had. So it was like we just blended. It was a great thing. It was so much fun, you know.
Yeah, and you guys did some great stuff with Jado and Gato, with Raven and Dreamer. Do you have any favorite tag matches that kind of stick out at that time period?
Jado and Gato from FMW that night at the ECW arena. I mean, to this day, I haven't had a crowd react to a match with, I mean, just literally 3,000 people, you know, on the edge of their seats. You know, it was amazing. It was so cool.
Was that match important to Lance as well? Because I know he has a history in working in the WAR promotion with them as well, right? So was Lance kind of fired up to help them out?
Absolutely, you know, and I didn't know who they were. He was way more, you know, I'd never been to Japan at that point. So I didn't know much about them at all. So Lance was very much in you know, plugged in and had worked with them in the past in Japan. So it was very important to him, you know, and it was fun. It was effortless, dude. It was like we were just having fun out there, you know, and it was so cool, and they enjoyed it as well. And you know, if wrestling was that easy all the time, like literally, it was like we were laughing out there, like joking around, having fun. Just it was a blast, and you know, nobody got hurt. It was like what wrestling should be, kind of a thing, you know.
Well, and it shows in the work too, because, you know, obviously it's something that people are still talking about how many years later, right?
Right, almost 20 years later. It's crazy. It's crazy. Yeah, absolutely.
So what was it like the night you won the ECW World Title? Who told you that you were going to be winning it, and what did that mean to you? Because, you know, you came from the WWF with the Aldo gimmick, and now all of a sudden you're getting the World Title put on you. From a personal standpoint, was that kind of like a big moment, like a proud moment for you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I didn't find out till probably 45 minutes before it happened.
No shit.
It was like around intermission during that show that I found out, because Paul was infamous at not telling people, you know, because he didn't want things to get out to the dirt sheets and so forth. So I didn't find out till about 45 minutes till I went out there. So I was totally caught by surprise. I did not know I was winning the title at all. To me, it was just another night. I saw I was like, oh, I'm not on the card tonight. That kind of is weird. You know, lo and behold, I was winning the world title. But it was really cool. I didn't win any title, you know, I didn't win anything, you know, it's not real. So I'm not pinning anybody, but why it was so significant to me is this is one of the top promotions in the entire world. It's number 3 in the United States because, you know, back then it was AWA, WCW, WWF. And, you know, AWA, the old AWA went away, and we were like the third promotion that recognized a world title. So for me to be on top of a promotion that was featured on pay-per-view, that was featured on television, it's like I was in the conversation with some of the greatest in the business. So for me, it was like Paul showed he had faith in me to draw and to create memorable matches, memorable angles, and to really toe the line for ECW. You know what I mean? So that's what it meant to me. It wasn't about me being a mark for the belt. it was that Paul trusted me to carry that end of the business, so to speak, if that makes any sense.
No,
You know?
absolutely. And
Yeah.
it's got to feel nice to get your work rewarded as well, right?
It's amazingly rewarding, and to this day, I'm very grateful.
Well, and in the year 2000, you were on fire, man. And even the magazines were picking up on it. You were ranked
Sure.
number 6 in the PWI 500, which
Yeah.
I know it's just a magazine or whatever, but that's still a pretty cool feat to have, to be
Sure,
recognized like that. What was it like to be paired up with Francine after this as well? You guys had great chemistry together. Do you feel that she added a lot to the character and to the title as well?
I thought so. It was fun to work with the lady because ECW was known for and stuff like that. So for us, Tommy Dreamer, he had Francine at one point, and he had Beulah at one point. So it was always like, it was almost like a gimmick where if I had a valet and he had a valet, which you don't see very much of these days. You have lady wrestlers, you have women's wrestling. You don't have valets like the old school managers like Woman or Sherry Martel, you know what I mean, etc. You can go on and on. But when the girls got in the ring, it was the infamous cat fights that were so cool because, you just don't see that nowadays.
Yeah.
And it was just, I know it's a sign of the times and so forth, but it was something that was fun that, especially for young adult adolescents or adolescent/teen adult, kind of things that, it's like, really, it's like college kids love that shit. High school kids love that shit. And it's what it was. You know what I mean? It's like two scantily clad women rolling around having a cat fight.
No.
And unfortunately, that's one thing I don't like about this culture that we're in today. It's not necessarily disrespectful because those were two of the most respectful women, both married with children today. But it was fun. I think we forget the fact that pro wrestling is supposed to be fun.
Absolutely.
And, and we were having fun and everybody was, I don't know. I just wish we could sometimes take that to that level again where wrestling could be fun. Because sometimes we take something so seriously. And at the end of the day, we're guys rolling around in tights pretending to fight. I think we should just kind of, sometimes we take it a little bit too seriously, but nonetheless, I loved it. I thought it was great, and it was so much fun to work.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, man.
Yeah.
I think everybody needs to loosen up a little bit as it is in the world today, man. You guys are out there entertaining us. If you don't like something, just don't fucking watch it, right? No one's forcing you.
And again, we're not doing anything negative,
No.
we're just, it's just entertainment for entertainment's sake. I mean, but it is what it is. Time and place for everything, I guess,
With Francine too, do you think that she's a name that kind of gets lost in the shuffle when it comes to everybody talking about what the women have done in the business? Because she was super tough. She was in some of the big angles.
Sure.
I just feel like she was one of those pioneers that doesn't get enough credit that she should in today's wrestling world.
Yeah, I think so. I think that Francine certainly doesn't get spoken highly enough because she was a valet, not because she was not a pro wrestler. And that's two totally different things. Just almost really like how there were managers. We don't really have managers in wrestling either. Like the Bobby the Brain Heenans or the, the Mr. Fujis or the Harvey Whipplemans, which I wish we would kind of bring back, like the male managers. It was just a kind of a throwback to that era. So, I think she deserves a lot of credit because she was very good at what she did. And that's what it was, though. Especially not necessarily when she was with me, we had our own dynamic, but when she was with the franchise, it's like, he's the blonde-haired, blue-eyed world champion. He's 250, 6'2", just like looks great, could wrestle, could kick your ass, and he's with the chick you want to be with.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with telling that story. We forget,
Not at all.
like, we're actors and actresses at the end of the day, right? I don't know why we've jumped on this high horse of having to, represent. It's like everybody feels like, oh, you're misrepresenting women. No, we're telling a story. We're not telling the story of Francine Fournier. We're telling the story of Francine from ECW, a character, just like an actress. You're not Princess Carrie Fisher is not Princess Leia.
No.
You know what I mean? And people forget we're playing characters, and that was a character that was played on television. And I think people need to kind of, take it for what it is and kind of just chill out with that stuff, because, sometimes we miss the fun of it all, because wrestling was supposed to be fun.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I've been a fan my whole life, and that's what you know what I mean? I respect what you guys do, because you guys sacrifice so much, but at the end of the day, it's entertainment for us as well, right? You shouldn't take it so serious. I'm with you.
Absolutely.
There was a pretty serious incident, though, in 2000 at the Heatwave pay-per-view. What do you remember? You were out in the ring when that happened with all the XPW guys. Yeah. What do you remember about that? That was probably not a smart move on their part, eh?
No, it wasn't. I just remember Dreamer looking at me and said, "I think Francine just got hit." And I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Yeah." And we're facing off, right, on pay-per-view. And these are the words that we're exchanging. Lo and behold, it broke down, and it was stupid. But that's how serious the competition had gotten, and they wanted what we had, so they figured it was a cheap shot for them to get some recognition on a national scale. So it was what it was. Thank God nothing really bad happened.
Absolutely. Yeah. So towards the beginning of the next year, you find yourself back in the WWF with X-Pac. How do you end up back in there after ECW goes out of business, and how much fun was it teaming with X-Pac?
When I wrestled ECW's last match, it was a house show out in, I think it was near Oklahoma or something like that. But either way, I finished up with ECW. There was nothing left. I reached out to Jim Ross, and I was lucky enough to get offered a job, and they put me with X-Pac, and it was great. It's like, here I am working with a friend that I've known for a very long time. To this day, I still talk to him. I talked to him a couple days ago when I was out in LA. So it was a lot of fun. It was a dream come true, to be honest. Unfortunately, I don't think, for many reasons, it just wasn't what we wanted it to be. He was in the midst of a contract renegotiation, and he wanted to kind of be in the singles, and also the alliance and that whole ECW WCW alliance angle happened, and he went with the WWE. I went with the alliance. So that was just a split prematurely, because all that stuff happened. The X Factor happened before the alliance and stuff. Yeah. So we got kind of caught in the middle of that shit. So unfortunately, it was doomed from the get-go,
Yeah, and you had a part. You mentioned the alliance there, and it's not fondly remembered by a lot of fans, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But you were part of one of probably the shining parts of it. How cool was it to be involved with that little ECW reunion in Atlanta there before the end of the show, really, at least?
Cool. Yeah, it was really cool, and you really felt the fans. You really felt the fans embrace it. Now, unfortunately, the minute that they popped so hard for us when we joined in Atlanta, the end of the show was when they uncovered, the McMahon angle that WCW and ECW were bought off by, and from there it's like they were at a pinnacle high of pop to complete shit show, and the fans booing it horribly. So they went from we nailed it to oh shit.
Yeah,
and the fans really let them know,
No, absolutely. And I remember being disappointed as a fan with that one, because I was an ECW guy, right? And right. That moment, and Paul with the promo, I was like, holy shit, they saved this thing.
And that's what they wanted. The fans really wanted that. I just think that the WWE was, I don't know if they were scared or just didn't want to give the devil his due, and to put him, to put him over for what everybody else already knew, that ECW was, in fact, something very special,
I want to fast forward a little bit here. I want to go to the 2006, and what kind of excitement was in the air around those ECW reunion shows?
Oh, the one-night stands.
One-night stand, and even the hardcore homecoming shows the night before that Shane put on.
Sure.
How fun was that, just to get back with the boys and to be out on that?
It was so much fun. I mean, we thought for sure that something positive was going to come out of it. And something positive did come out of it. Unfortunately, it happened to be Vince's new version of ECW, which, he had an opportunity to do it right, but he just couldn't help himself. He couldn't help himself, unfortunately.
Yeah, and you had a pretty memorable match with CM Punk on there in the Hammerstein
Yeah.
Ballroom. How cool was
Yeah.
it to be in the ballroom in a WWE ring? Because that's a cool visual to have, and to work Punk's first match with him in the
It
big
was
stage.
great. I mean, it was fun, and Punk was so grateful. I remember him being in tears, about his debut. He's like, man, I'm so grateful. I was such a fan of yours, and thank you for doing the favor. He was just so happy. Just a young kid finally getting his break. Who would have known all these years later what would have happened? But it was the start of something special for him. That's for sure.
No, absolutely, it was. What made you decide to leave the company around that time? Because you weren't there for too long.
No, I left. I just stopped showing up, dude. The pay was shit, to be honest, and they were jobbing me out to everyone. So I just told them I'm not coming anymore.
No, that's
It's not like I was getting rich and killing my name. I was just killing my name.
Yeah, no, that's smart, because then you can still go out and make a great living on the scene with TNA at the time as well.
Yeah, I just wasn't doing it. So that was the reason. Yeah.
That's smart, man.
I left on my own terms that time.
That's good. That's smart.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk a little bit of current product with you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
The year 2020, it's been a pretty crazy year for professional wrestling with the pandemic and everything. First of all, from your standpoint, how's it been for you? What's it like out there now? I know you just did a show the other day. What's it like going out there right now? Is it nerve-wracking for you? How's it been for you?
It is for some people. I don't necessarily. I mean, I take good care of myself physically. I take a lot of vitamins and supplements. Because they say that's one thing you have to in with coronavirus, COVID, you have to really worry about your immune system. So I take a lot of multivitamins, vitamin D, just regular vitamins, nothing crazy, just supplements. Just vitamin C stuff you would do to prevent a common cold or flu. I try to stay in shape and just to be smart about it. And I don't do it, but I'm not necessarily worried about it. But it's certainly taken an impact on us. I mean, I lost about $20,000 this year in bookings alone. A lot of us have been struggling financially, not just myself, many others. Guys even with a bigger name than I have, because this is how we make our living. And literally, I lost every single booking from a certain date this year onward. I just recently have been getting a couple of bookings trickle in, but it's been very challenging and. Only time will tell what's going to happen with all of this. We're still in the middle of it. Oh,
absolutely, and hopefully that turns around and we can get back out there and get back into the grind. What are your thoughts on the current product right now with the big companies? You got AEW as an alternative now. You got the WWE and the Thunderdome. How are you enjoying? Is there anything or anything you like watching?
I don't. To be honest, I can't watch wrestling. I do because I have a podcast every Friday. I have an AEW review show with Vince Russo that I do. AEW is difficult to watch because they have a lot of potential. They have great men and women wrestling there. I just feel that, man, for having a 2-hour live show on TNT, wrestling, has been gone from TNT, absent for almost 20 years, to be back on TNT. And to just not, I don't know, man. To me, there's something missing. I feel like when I watch it, it's almost like indie wrestling on TNT. It almost doesn't feel right. Mm-hmm. So I'm a little critical of that. I don't know, man. I think we're at a place where wrestling needs something different. Wrestling needs to change. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it looks like. But somewhere down the line, something needs to happen to really, I don't know if it's going to be during the COVID era. I don't know if we're a couple of years from it, but it's going to get to a point like where the Attitude Era was. It's like, stuff is going to get stale and then somebody is going to be out there. And I was hoping it was AEW. It hasn't been so far, but hopefully, something comes where it just blows everybody away and, we take off on another boom period,
Oh, absolutely. So you kind of segued into and mentioned something that I kind of want to talk about. You said, there needs to be something different. So on our podcast, we do a top 7 gimmick where we go back and we count down top 7 moments in the history of professional wrestling about anything. We like to be positive, right? So I'm doing a top 7 2020 moments right now. And the number 2 on my list, I've got the Boneyard match with The Undertaker and AJ Styles, as well as, kind of just The Undertaker's whole retirement in general. What are your thoughts on the cinematic matches? What did you think if you did see the Boneyard match? And then maybe just at the end, if you could just talk a little about The Undertaker and his impact in the business.
I'm not a huge fan of cinematic matches. And I did watch the Boneyard match. It was last year's WrestleMania.
Yeah.
I just, to me, it's watching a movie. I mean, and even the WWE, behind the scenes, they put it over as, we were taping this thing for 20 hours. It's like, yeah, that's called being on a movie set.
Yeah.
What pro wrestling is you're in a squared circle, and through hook or by crook, you're in there for 20, 30 minutes, whatever the time limit is, and you're wrestling. And the thing people forget is the reason wrestling, the word shoot comes to mind is, wrestling, not all the time people will want to do the job. There were times in wrestling in the 80s and, in Japan and even sometimes in the 90s where guys didn't want to do the job and would kind of resist at times. So people forget wrestling isn't always this, almost like a movie kind of a thing. So I just wish we can get it more back to, and I'm not doing it service. I'm not describing it right. I'm not doing it justice to what I want to communicate. So I digress. But I just wish wrestling would get back to some kind of old school ethics of it being more of a contest than it being a performance art.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like for me, I haven't been a huge fan of a lot of the cinematic matches either because I think they're too silly. I did like the Boneyard one because it was The Undertaker and he took it serious and it felt more like a fight. But I think the cinematic match, I think it was a nice try, but I think I'm with you. I hope they move on from it. And then, of course, the WWE overdoes it to death. And, it was every week they had one going there for a bit. And it's just overkilling the product.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I got one more question I want to ask you because you've been great with your time, man, and we really appreciate coming on the show. And also in the year 2020, you have made your return to pay-per-view.
Yes.
You recently just made a fantastic appearance on Talkin' Shopomania 2 with the Good Brothers.
Yes.
You, Tommy Dreamer, and Rhino. One of the highlights for me of the show. You guys were absolutely hilarious in it. Fantastic job. You guys are definitely softcore. How fun is it to go out? Because all the stories you hear online or whatever, right? It's so much fun to be out there. It just looks like the boys are having a great time. What was it like getting out on the compound there at Gallows' house and just? Oh,
it was just exactly what it is, and what it's supposed to be. A bunch of us having fun, man, and by having fun, fans have fun. It's like we're all in this little brotherhood together. And it was just, man, it's just us being us. And in a way, it's not so much of a work. We're really like, of course it's a parody, but we're like, oh God, in real life, we're like, oh my God, all right, let me get down to my knees here. Ooh, that hurts. Of course it's 100% like exaggerated, but at the end of the day, that's kind of, we're feeling more that way than we are the old ECW way. So it was just fun. It's just us parodying ourselves and just having a good time with it, man. And that's what wrestling needs is just, more good times in it, because wrestling is supposed to be fun, at the end of the day.
Absolutely, man. I couldn't agree with you more. And Justin, you've been fantastic with your time.
Well, thank you. And you've been great too, man. Thank you for having me. I really
appreciate it, man. You're one of my personal favorites. I've been a fan for 30 years. And this is a great honor for me. I'm a huge fan of yours. Give me some stuff where people can find you, man. Plug your stuff. You're doing a podcast, social media.
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, you could follow me on Instagram at PJ Polaco, also on Twitter at PJ Polaco. Of course, if you want any of my merchandise, any of my T-shirts, go to prowrestlingtees.com/justincredible, and I will have many other things that are happening very soon. Also, I have a new partnership with theindyconnection.com, and I have a brand new shirt out for them as well. So just check out my social media that I've listed prior, and I'll have all events, everything that I'm into on there, and you can check it out, man, for sure.
Perfect. Make sure you guys check that out. Buy a T-shirt. Help Justin out, man. It's a hard time for everybody with this COVID.
Absolutely. Yes.
We want to do what we can. I'll plug all the stuff on our social media as well for you.
Awesome, brother. Thank you so much for your time. I had a great time, and I really appreciate it.